Nah.
What? Alright my dudes, time to learn about the legendary System Shock 2. We did check out the first System Shock video by Mandalore, and there were some things that felt really cool, but just needed a little more refinement. So that's what I'm expecting to see from the sequel. Also, thank you for letting me know that the System Shock 1 remake is actually pretty darn good. And I think somebody said that they announced in their Discord or whatever that they were working on a remake for 2 as well. I do have a very long list of games to get to, but maybe at some point in the distant future, I might try them out. But anyways, dudes, as per the usual, make sure to go support the OG video. Link to that is at the very top of the description, as always.
A worm crawled up my arm and rested on my neck. When he whispered into my ear, I felt a tingle. He told me how to make a weapon that would help us against our enemies. And here's the thing, it's made of worms. It even fires worms, but it stings like you wouldn't believe.
What the hell? What kind of worm are we talking about?
System Shock 1 was a fantastic game. A well-designed sci-fi dungeon crawler with plenty of options and freedom. Like Ultima Underworld before it, it could have gotten a sequel that was basically the same game again, just with some new additions and features. Instead, it didn't get a sequel for 5 years, and it resulted in a very different game. For one, it was a joint venture between two companies, Looking Glass and Other Looking Glass. Irrational Games was founded by 3 ex-employees of LGS who are now back working with their old team, just as a partner company rather than employees. The game itself was being developed using the Dark Engine. At the same time, the Dark Engine was being made for Thief 1. So you may notice quite a few similarly shaped enemies or the same animations being used back and forth. Thief 1 fed System Shock 2, which in turn fed Thief 2. The entire stealth system is still in the game, you're just short a light gem and some levels that truly support it. It is ironic.
Man, it's cool to see these intertwined series, and it makes sense. I mean, they're from the same developers, but the history of video games is just so fascinating because it's also coupled with the history of technology. A lot of this just simply wasn't possible back then, even if they had this sort of idea in mind or their kind of vision for the game originally.
Ironic that System Shock 1 was built off the back of a fantasy game, and now 2 is doing the same. I'm not making any kind of asset counter, but if you see one you can take a shot or something. But it is worth pointing out because it can explain some weirdness. Ever wondered why mutants hold shotguns like that? Well, now you know. Naturally, both engines had some issues on modern hardware, but System Shock 2 has been better taken care of officially. Both the Steam and GOG versions are updated with New Dark. However, you can make your experience much better. So let's get started. Now, no matter what, you should really want to download System Shock 2 tool. This makes sure you have the latest
Mountain lions in my basement? Is that like a particular quest? From the character model, that looked like it was from Oblivion.
And best community New Dark version of the game. It fixes engine issues, gives you better default controls, and automatically upgrades you to EAX sound. Even if you are the purest solely for Procreation vanilla player, you should have this tool. But it also includes a mod manager. If you saw my Thief videos, you know I'm very particular about this kind of thing. Mods are great, but if it's your first time playing a game, especially a classic like this one, you don't want to mod yourself out of knowing what it's like. I've replayed this game a lot over the years, and these are the ones I now never play without. If it's your first time playing the game, you'll also be safe. This game had a lot of development issues, and
I, too, whenever I try out a new video game, want to try it out without any mods, just so that I can get that vanilla experience that all of you guys probably had during the initial stages of the game's production, or release, I should say. I feel pretty much the same. It's only when I'm doing like a re-playthrough of the game that I decide to introduce some cosmetic mods or anything that adds on to the main story, or unless if it's like a mod that most people consider to be required because it just fixes things and it improves quality of life. Like for instance, our Fallout New Vegas playthrough. There are a ton of mods there, but those are all mods that just basically make it easier for me as a streamer to kind of keep track of what's going on, as well as improve visual clarity here and there.
And could have used some more time to polish things up. That's the goal of the community patch. For one, it has an absurd amount of fixes built into it. Misaligned or floating objects, engine issues, they're all gone. They enhanced how the lighting works, cleaned up effects. It's kind of insane how much there is, and I can't really properly list them all out. That said, there are some gameplay changes, but they're ones that make sense. Let me give some examples. In vanilla, hacking security disables local turrets and cameras. Except if there are 2 turrets in a room and you hack one over, they'll both activate and start murdering each other. In the patch, that doesn't happen, and they both sit there like you'd expect. Also, cameras don't just stay green and keep swinging around like they're still functioning, they turn off. This adds some extra challenge because it's now easier to miss turned off cameras. So if you hack an area and you're not careful, you'll be in for some fun on the way back. If you skip training in the beginning, you'll no longer have help stations around. Most of the developers weren't fond of them. Some upgrades were buffed to make them more attractive instead of useless. Fire-based attacks can finally get rid of those fucking bees. Surgical beds finally get rid of toxin, dripping acid hurts you, you can click drag the game pig. It doesn't radically change the gameplay or throw things out of balance. It just makes it better. They've been at this for years and they know what they're doing. So when they recommend a graphical mod which itself recommends another one, you can trust that. I'm extremely wary of texture overhauls your first time through, and when it came to Thief, I couldn't recommend any of them. So believe me when I say the Shut Up Object Replacer is exceptionally good. It replaces object textures with higher resolution ones that don't break the art style. The same thing goes for the 400 Terrain Replacer. The differences can be subtle at a quick glance, which I guess is ideal for how it should be. If you're still on a really old PC, it's not something you desperately need, but it's nice to have if you take the time for it. There are great graphic mods that cover everything from plants to weapons, but I typically don't use all those and I won't for this video, because eventually things do start looking out of place and enemies especially aren't high resolution enough to keep up. There is one enemy graphical mod, but well, some liberties were taken with the art style and oh Jesus Christ. So that's as far as I go.
Wait a minute. I see. I'm sure there were certainly some liberties that were taken here.
So that's as far as I go here. Also, the patch mod has the real shotgun mod on the same page. The original shotgun enemy had the weapon as part of the model, so you'd loot the shotgun off, but it would like still be on the body and it was just weird to look at. So that game breaking issue is fixed. Your mod manager should look something like this. I'll pin links and stuff in the top comment to make this all super easy. So with that all done, let's get into the game proper. System Shock 1 is recapped in about 20 seconds. The rogue AI Shodan took over Citadel Station and tried to wipe out humanity. She was stopped by the hacker. You're all caught up, so what's happening this round?
Shodan has to come back, right? What?
February 3rd is the day the magic happens. The Von Braun, the first starship in history capable of traveling at faster than light speed, will undertake her maiden voyage. This incredible journey is the result of teamwork between the UNN Protectorate and the incredible scientific minds at the newly relicensed Tri-Optimum Corporation. Imagine being able to travel to distant star systems in a period of weeks. It's all part of Tri-Op's commitment to the future. The Von Braun is packed with over 1.8 billion flight, scientific, and security systems, nearly all developed by Tri-Optimum and its wholly owned subsidiaries. Providing security for the Von Braun as she plows through the heavens will be the UNN Rickenbacker. At her helm will be no less than Captain William Bedford Diego himself, hero of...
Diego? Wait a minute. Okay, it's been like a week since I watched the last System Shock 1 review. That name sounds very familiar. Wasn't it the guy who hired us? Or maybe a relative of the guy who hired us and was kind of the initial cause for the whole Shodan incident. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but we'll see.
The Battle of Boston Harbor during the Eastern States Police action. This incredible union of government and corporation is made possible by an intricate series of docking mechanisms that will allow the Rickenbacker to piggyback its way into jump space. Sleek. Fast.
Sleek.
Revolutionary. Who knows what wonders await our crews in the bosom of the cosmos? All we do know is that it's a great day for mankind.
Oh, there'll be some wonders.
Oh, God.
But before you go aboard the Von Braun, you have character creation to do. You start the game on Earth at a UNN training facility. You can explore a bit here, learn the controls, play the tutorials, and from here you choose your branch of the military.
Oh, this is where things do we have the whole hacking thing from the first game again? Looked a little bit different there, though.
A little vague and tricky, so let me explain. I don't think there's an agreed upon point exact best character build, but System Shock 2 definitely has lots and lots of wrong character builds. It can also be easy to make a mistake your first time through. Some players go through training and find out their character has no idea how to use a pistol, though that is viable. The repair skill lets you fix items and weapons that are completely broken, but keeping them from breaking needs the maintenance skill. This already seems iffy, but now add on there are some auto repair items floating around.
Okay. That is a bit strange. Repair and maintenance, you would think, mean pretty much the same thing, but in the terms of the game, I guess not. But I suppose this is the hallmark of older RPG games, where there are a bunch of parameters that people who aren't just the absolute nerdiest of us all wouldn't really understand at first glance. It's not as intuitive as it is nowadays, or well, hopefully is nowadays. I know that there still are some pretty convoluted games that don't really get how the consumer thinks. That, or you have the opposite end of the spectrum where it's just constant pop-up tips telling you every single thing that you need to do in the game, which also isn't very fun.
You can guess what I've never put a skill point into in my life. System Shock 2 Repair makes Deus Ex Swimming look like Fallout Speech. Okay, no, that's too psychotic. The point is, even if you
Deus Ex Swimming look like Fallout Speech? What? I still don't know about Deus Ex at all, but I'm assuming it also has the more convoluted RPG mechanics. Honestly though, with Fallout New Vegas, it took some time, but you do sort of get used to the system. However, during the first few streams when I was trying to figure out like my character build and what to go for and what would improve what, or like how to improve my stats temporarily and all that stuff, it was completely unfamiliar territory to me and I was quite confused. I can only imagine the Fallout 1 and 2 being a lot more detailed and complex in those areas.
Go through the manual to find out how all the skills work, you won't know how the game works until you just get in and play it. Deciding to restart and rebuild your character an hour in isn't anything unusual. This is also a good time to mention how the difficulty settings work. Once again, there are some similarities to Thief, but nothing quite as in-depth. The enemy AI isn't affected and their stats don't go up. Instead, your starting health and space magic pools will go down. On Impossible, you're easily one-shot by the first enemy you see. Difficulties also include very slight map changes. Something like a security station to hack into might not be there when things get harder. Enemies will spawn more frequently, but they'll also drop less loot. The violence is escalating and so is the prices of items in the stores. Really out there sci-fi stuff. Despite all of that, I think the biggest change comes from how you can actually develop your character. This is because throughout the game you receive cyber mods, which are basically just your skill points. You can then visit your local Tesla diaper changing station to enhance your abilities. You get the same number of mods per game, but like the store prices, the cost to upgrade also goes up. Buying new skills is usually more expensive than upgrading, and this just makes that harder. The scarcity adds more tension, so it's great if you're experienced. However, this does have some playstyle drawbacks, which I'll talk about more in detail later. If you don't know the game, it's easier to make a sillier character that's harder to recover from. If you're thinking that skill balance sounds important, you're right. So what if I told you the initial branches indicate nothing? You won't know what you'll start off with until you take the plunge. You'll receive 3 sets of 3 different assignments. They tell you what skills you gain and each represents a year in a military career. They even have nice little lore bits of what you did. Each branch is still very geared around creating a certain class of character. So here's the quick rundown on each. The Marine Corps is self-explanatory. You go to Camp Lejeune to avoid snake pits and be screamed at by men with no foreheads, and for this you get a standard weapon point. Your first choices are mainly around which weapons to use and how to maintain them. You can start the game with a grenade launcher. The Navy also gives you a standard weapon point, but you have options to make a more sciencey or hackerman character. So it can be similar to a Marine build, just with less Crayola chaos. As for the OSA, I don't know what the hell happens in there, but they make you a space wizard. This is the interesting branch to go into. You typically go here to make a space wizard because if not, the other 2 branches are usually a better choice. Now you can play the entire game not knowing what magic is and not being shoved in a locker. I'm still not sure how magic works, much less space magic, because my local bookstore is still being shoplifted. I don't know what the hell is happening there.
Wait, what? What the heck? Daily Wisdom for Men, Discovering Strength in God's Presence, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Stardust Crusaders? Yep, sounds about right. You want to know how to be a man? Read JoJo's. The 3 different paths here that you can take at the beginning of the game sort of remind me of when I booted up Kingdom Hearts 1 for the first time. And then it makes you choose the sword, the shield, or the wand. I think all 3 of them are pretty much viable, but there are ones that are easier to take as a combination, as opposed to the more harder magic side of things. At least from what I learned from you guys in chat.
Anyways, the opposite is also true. You can spec into Psyker powers and never have to pick up a gun during the game, because fireballs don't need a conceal permit, neither does the brain sword. There are lots of powers to learn, but there is some trickiness to managing them. It's a very different playthrough worth doing, but not really recommended for a first-time player. It's very different. There are so many layers to character progression and difficulty and how it all ties into the systems. I'll come back to it later, but wow, that's a lot to start off with. Especially when the first game just had the screen and then you were in. I can still appreciate just how much work they put into the character creation segment. A lot of effort was put in to immerse you into the story and the universe. And this is following a game where you could flat out turn off the plot. Speaking of, let's get back to that. In your 4th year of service, you're assigned to the Rickenbacker to escort the Von Braun. With Traptimum at the helm, it's going as well as you'd expect.
Yeah, that's how it always goes in all these sci-fi series. I'm honestly not surprised though that we've added so many new things to the second game, because the first one felt like a mosh pit of really cool ideas that everybody was able to come up with. And we just put all of them into the same game. Here we just decided to implement even more of them and make all these systems interesting and unique.
Reinitializing memory strings.
Steady yourself, soldier. This is Dr. Janice Polito of the computer ops staff of the Von Braun. You're safe for the time being. You're recovering from the effects of surgery and will be unable to remember any of the events of the last few weeks. You're on board the starship Von Braun and something's gone very, very wrong. Some kind of force has hijacked this ship. That's why you volunteered to be implanted with some experimental cybernetic implants. Rely on your cyber interface. It just might save your life. You must find an elevator and come up to Deck 4 to meet me. Deck 4. Can you remember that? But keep your eyes open. They're after us both now.
And so it begins.
I'm kind of not trusting this voice. Isn't it so convenient that we underwent a surgery that just so happened to remove our memories of the past few weeks? A common plot device for sure, but when used creatively, it can work quite well.
The Von Braun made a stop at Tau Ceti 5 to investigate a mysterious signal. This signal was the work of an alien life form only known as the Many.
Wait, Tau Ceti 5? Tau Ceti 5. Why am I getting marathon flashbacks? There were quite a few comments that are like, Zero, you need to get rid of this marathon brain rot. Not everything has a deeper meaning. But bro, isn't Tau Ceti from Marathon? Was it a reference? Did they cross-reference each other's games? Are they somehow in the same universe? Either that or I'm misremembering all of this. But I'm almost fairly certain it's from Marathon.
They're hellbent on assimilating the crew and wreaking havoc for reasons unknown. It's you and Dr. Polito against them all. Looking back at Vanilla for a moment, the graphics are pretty nice looking for 99. Then again, in this case, even Vanilla is still using the new Dark engine. And with the game being patched over the years, there are subtle differences compared to an actual CD copy. Plus, I'll be playing a modded copy anyways, so if you're looking for technical purity or something, I don't know, go to Plymouth. The environments still look pretty good, but the shortcomings definitely come from the character models. And really, this is still from a much later perspective. Fidelity gets at a—
Well, the character models in this particular engine were not great in the first place. It's to be expected. I felt like they focused on everything else as opposed to just making the models look good. I know that in both this video as well as the Thief series, Mandalore sort of emphasizes this point, but I'm not too sure whether that has such a great effect on the actual gameplay, or rather your experience as a player of the game, where the character models just look a little bit off. I suppose this is something that depends on the person, because for Mandalore, I can see it being a case of like, oh, I noticed this thing because I often review games, so it might bother me more than most people. In a similar fashion to when I watch an anime, and then it has a very, let's say, uninspired plot development, and I'm like, ugh, how many other shows, how many other pieces of media have I seen do this exact same thing that you're doing? Or even worse, make the exact same mistakes that everybody else makes. You really hate to see it, because I just want to enjoy it, you know? But once you've trained your eye to spot out these things, it becomes impossible to enjoy it blind. Like, somebody who's new to the franchise or new to the IP or new to the media would just feel much more excited about those certain developments. Personally, my ultimate goal is to reach a state of zen, I suppose, where I just enjoy everything, even if it's bad. Wouldn't life be so much more wonderful that way? I think I still got a ways to go, though.
Out of date, but design is forever, and the enemies have outstanding art direction. Well, except maybe the spiders. You could go a lot more horrifying with an alien spider, but that's okay because they are awful in different ways. It's quite the roster, and I don't want to spoil all of it. Like Thief before it, the environments are definitely the strongest aspect. The Von Braun is a clean, ideal future Star Trek ship, or at least it was before the Many showed up, which gives everything a creepy contrast. This was a high-tech science ship, so it's sterile, but there were still places for people to relax comfortably. So you have this effect where one room can look completely pristine, and the next one has a slasher film massacre in it. There are plenty of sci-fi horror games, including ones I love, that have really creepy-looking environments. Dirty, dark, industrial. System Shock 2.
I should also probably watch, I don't know if Mandalore did a review on Dead Space. I know a lot of my friends, like Serby, Nivi, and Cashew. I don't think Cashew did, but I know Serby and Nivi streamed the games. and I want to learn more about them. Because as a fan of horror and sci-fi, you'd think I already played those games, but no.
2 has those as well, but it goes to an exact opposite so often. Clean, well lit, and sometimes something is wrong. Sometimes something is very wrong. It's unsettling in a way I don't see games or even movies or TV do that often. Nowhere feels safe. You don't have a sectioned off scary dark place and a secure bright one. An enemy could be wandering over to kill you at any moment. You're kept on your toes constantly, and how uncluttered a room is indicates nothing. Think you're safe? Think again. This pool. This pool reminds me of something. Oh god.
Oh god!
Just excellent attention to detail.
Okay, well, that was a completely different thing from what I just randomly popped into my head. I don't even know how to describe it. It was like, was it a music video? No, I think it was like an animation where a bunch of teens broke into a swimming pool at night. They started swimming. Things started going wrong. One of the teenagers turned into a monster and started eating everybody. And then one of the guys like swam down into the pool, went through it to the other side, and then burned to a crisp after staring at an eldritch being? What is this memory? I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I can imagine every single shot of that animation. That's what that reminded me of. If one of you guys recognize what I'm talking about, please let me know in the comments. I'm pretty good at visual memory, but when it comes to remembering the name of said thing, I'm kind of lost.
Detail all around. The game has an atmosphere quite unlike any other one I've played, and that uniqueness has stood the test of time. It could be that everything is being elevated by the excellent audio design. If you're lucky, you'll be hearing the enemies before you see them.
This was a point you guys brought up in the first System Shock as well. And I mean, this is Looking Glass Studio. I shouldn't have been surprised. The audio design was kind of nuts. However, the critique for the audio design in 1 was kind of skewed simply because of more modern hardware interpreting the sounds differently. But, you know, since it's Looking Glass, we're using the same engine, we're working off the same, I suppose, direction when it comes to creating games, then yes, the audio here is going to go absolutely nuts.
Join us!
Join us! What the?
Not ours.
The directional audio is great. You can actually hear enemies coming up behind you, which is pretty darn important. Also, the different sounds of walking on the floor.
These might be the most nightmare fuel cyborgs. Might be.
I don't know where that's from.
Associates, but you cannot find them.
You are so very alone.
Oh!
The voice acting is that Looking Glass scale of extremes. Some lines still have that "who do we have today in the office to do them" effect, but
or, you know, maybe it would be a welcome meeting if there was the other mod that changed the character model. I don't know.
But luckily not too often.
I got called up around 0430 to help unload the shuttle coming back from Tau Ceti. Kerenskin was there alone. Jesus, what the hell happened to him? He'd lost most of his hair, and you could see these lumps on the side of his neck. And that smell. I told him he should go see Dr. Watts, but he told me to mind my own business.
Then you have some of the most effective, scariest shit on the planet.
They have so many miracles to share, so much knowledge to give. They told me how to make this implant. They said it would make a better me of me. I wish I had more time so I could give it to them.
Oh, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of, I think they were called The Beast. It was like a biomechanical virus parasite thing that you fought in the Homeworld games. I think it was one of the spin-offs. They had a really cool effect on that particular creature's voice, where it was like an assimilation of so many different living beings, as well as the machine side of things too. Honestly, the way the audio was mixed for that might have been inspired from the original System Shock, because Shodan's audio is really damn good.
Please don't. Glory to the many. I am a voice in their choir.
What makes it more horrifying is a lot of the enemies you encounter don't actively want to fight you. They could be a reprogrammed weapon or transformed against their will. Most of the mutants you encounter are desperately trying not to hurt you, and they're losing.
Run.
I'm sorry.
It goes that extra mile to add more horror to them. They're already pretty ugly. The ambient sounds of the ship keep you on edge. The music can be subdued and tense, and then suddenly, something breaks the silence.
What was that? I think
a ton of effort was put into a tense, horrifying atmosphere. To this day, it shows up on scariest games of all time charts. Some people see those, get hyped up, and go in expecting Silent Hill. Then, when they first properly enter the ship, they hear the music. A lot of people weren't mentally prepared for the rave. Most of the soundtrack is electronic and the most late 90s techno it could be. It's always been a divisive topic. Understandably, some people don't find it fitting to the atmosphere, but it's a sick soundtrack.
Okay, I can see why people wouldn't find it very fitting for the more horrific side of things, but I actually kind of like this. At least in my mind, it sets it apart from other sci-fi horror games that try to achieve the same vibe here. And like, are we really surprised that this game has such good horror elements? The Thief series wasn't necessarily focused on it, but it did a really damn good job at it.
There are a large amount of people who recommend turning the music off, but as I said before, there is a good variety of tension music, and I can't imagine the mood of some levels without it.
There you go. Now this is much more horror sci-fi-esque.
The techno quiets down and the tension builds. It's hard to put my feelings into words on this, because yeah, how the music is implemented is very strange at times, but it's really only that way if you're trying to confine it into a horror genre. But viewed as a sci-fi action RPG, it's perfectly fitting. A lot of 90s shooters had big scary monsters to shoot at. While it might have a scare or two, you don't hear many people today call the original Doom a horror game. Then you have something with a lot more overt horror elements like Quake, but most people now would just call that a shooter. But Quake can have some amazing tense atmosphere. It could be that those elements were so well done in System Shock 2 that it catapulted it into a label. It is still trying to be a sci-fi dungeon crawler. Maybe the tracks would have gone over better if they were spaced out differently.
I wonder what the intention truly was. They made the monsters and atmosphere so well done that it catapulted it into the horror genre, but maybe that was never truly the intent. So obviously I haven't played this game before, so what I'm saying here isn't really from experience, but from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I think it would be a disservice to label a game in that way and say that because other games in this label, underneath this label, do this thing, then this game should have done the same thing in order to achieve a better result. I much prefer to see it as a unique experience that is a fantastic mix of a lot of things that we appreciate underneath the same game.
Because it is weird to encounter your first monster while hearing a Matrix rave, but it's solidified in my brain to where I couldn't imagine this any other way. I did learn something interesting that could tie into this. After my System Shock 1 video, I was contacted by someone close to Greg LaPiccolo. He was Shock 1's composer and sound guy, and he had some thoughts on why the music was so strange.
Oh, are we gonna go
It sounds
into
weird because it was never designed to be exported this way. It wasn't just the MIDI pack you used, it was also your sound card. Your sound card was supposed to be assembling and altering tracks from individual MIDI components. So it was dynamic music, but based on a lot more than I thought it was. It would change based on location, sure, but also other parameters, such as how alerted the enemy was, how much control Shodan had, how angry Shodan was with the player.
Oh, whoa, that's what, I mean, we're sitting here marveling at what they did with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal with the dynamic music, but we already had this way back here. Ah, damn! That's awesome. No wonder why it sounded so off. I'm glad Mandalore addressed it here, though.
Player. And these could be subtle differences. I didn't know how deep these went, and apparently nobody else did either. To quote the email, nobody really noticed or appreciated it, so it wasn't brought back for System Shock 2. I mean, when you make something that intricate, nobody notices, I can get the sentiment. Could developing on that made a more audio-consistent game? Sure, maybe. But our ears failed them. It's revenge techno.
Revenge techno.
Silence the Discord.
The audio can be compressed and there are pops here and there, but the overall quality and variety and layers still more than hold up. You can turn the music down if you want, but it'd be a real shame to play this game without hearing it. At least give it a shot. So you have a game already drawing you in with great visuals and sound. Now stack some solid gameplay on top of that. It controls very smoothly, though it still has that Dark Engine weirdness where you move faster diagonally. While the interface has improved over System Shock 1, the depth is still there. You've still got your CVS receipt of hotkeys, you can still play minigames on the screen, and additionally they added inventory management, which you did sort of have in the first game when it came to weapons, but overall you could carry an absurd amount of stuff in that one. Now every item takes up grid space, from booze to bullets. How much you can carry it all depends on your character's strength. What you can do is depend.
Did Resident Evil do this first, or did this game do it first? This whole grid-based inventory, or honestly maybe neither of them did it first. I don't know history well enough. I do certainly prefer this system though. It's a limited space, but you can visually see what's in your inventory, as opposed to it being a bunch of text on the bottom of your screen.
Dependent on your character skills. In the previous entry, you can explore around looking for new upgrades. Finding them helped you progress better, but you absolutely didn't need most of them. In 2, there are parts where you need to upgrade yourself to progress through the story. There's a part where you need the hacking skill, or at least an ice pick. There's also the part where you need to research a toxin. They're not huge moments, but they're a striking change from before. This is a full-fledged RPG. You've got wearable equipment like different types of armor. Implants can be installed to increase stats or boost different kinds of skills. There's software to plug in, which is separate from implants. There's the one-time upgrade operating system.
It says System Shock 2, but it is so different from the first game. Am I crazy to think that this is like such a massive leap forward? System Shock 2, in my mind, just from all that we've heard, we're only halfway through the video, it truly deserves that 2 behind its name, as opposed to a certain other series that slapped a 2 behind its name and didn't really change anything. I'm not gonna name any names here, but there's probably plenty of examples out there.
System stations. These can flat out buff you with higher damage, more inventory space, or give you more choices, like 2 implant slots. How you play the game and view the game world can be dramatically different based on these choices. This is the game's greatest strength and its weakness. There is a lot of variety, and the community patch tried to make some directions more viable, but you still get the sense there's a certain kind of character this game was made for. Sure, you could create a super hacker character, but you don't really need those points maxed out. At the same time, playing the game without any hacking skill makes me feel naked. There's so much benefit to having some hacking, but not a ton in maxing it out. A lot of the skills scale in this weird kind of way. The research skill lets you study certain items. A lot of them are enemy organs that give you a damage boost against them, which is very good, but no, you can't sell the organs. Okay, but there is more to it. Besides, inside.
But I just wanted pathologic in space. Why? I wanted to suffer! I'm actually willing to forgive the game a little bit on this side of things, because it was much earlier on where we didn't really figure out how to do RPGs like this and to make like every character build viable. Heck, even nowadays, that's not really a thing. There's obviously always going to be a meta build, things that just work more effectively than others. But generally speaking, for the most part, I think any build will usually be able to get you to the end of the game. Like, well, for those of you who are more knowledgeable about Fallout New Vegas, is there a particular build where you just kind of screwed? I don't think there is, simply because there's so much freedom to the gameplay. Here, however, we don't have that open worldness to it, so yeah, that's probably an issue. Or that issue becomes more apparent because of those limitations.
Besides, the many have strange new technology. Weapons, implants, armor. They have some deadly items, especially in the Crystal Shard, which is the most dangerous melee weapon in the game. The other items require much higher research and a higher skill investment. They also require an exotic weapons skill which you can't spec into until about halfway through the game. They also have the least amount of available ammo.
It even fires worms.
And they still aren't really as effective or versatile as something like standard weapons. The best one you get is near the end of the game, and it still needs to be maintained with a fairly high skill. Compare that to a weapon set that will always be effective throughout the entire game with plenty of ammo. You would think a higher investment might give you something more cool if you suffer during the early game, but not really. I mean, look at how hard research tapers off. You research more than half the items in the game with one level that you need. Research already requires you to backtrack to chemical rooms for materials, so you're going through the ship more doing this. Moving some buffs to higher research levels would make sense. A flat damage bonus across all weapons makes up for them not spending the points specializing yet. This is all just one example, but probably the biggest one. The final tier of psi powers have things that would be useful earlier on, but not really at the end game, and just stuff like that. The point is, between this and weird skills and item availability, something has always felt off about the balance. This is more noticeable the higher the difficulty goes because you have less points to spend.
Yeah, it was inevitable. The first game had some really good progression to it, at least according to Mandalore. But when you have all of these more complicated systems on top of each other, and everybody's sort of going through the same levels, there's going to be people who just have a better time at doing it. I'm not a game designer, but I can only imagine how difficult it would be to create scenarios for all of these different kinds of builds. It has to work for everybody. Yeah. I understand the unique difficulties there.
When it's easier, you have more leniency. You work towards short-term goals and can reasonably try out a lot of stuff. Whereas when things get harder, your point decisions are so much more crucial. So looking at it through an RPG standpoint, this is messy. It feels like there's supposed to be an intended way to play, but not exactly. I'd guess most players would enjoy this game by first rolling a gun hacker character, then later going back to experiment. The issue is, there's initially nothing to indicate the game will be this way. People make a build that sounds fun, they get their ass kicked, and then later find out that you're not supposed to try that until later. While the interface does look like a dialysis machine, System Shock 1 is so much more straightforward. You explore around, find new tools, and decide which ones to use by experimenting. You don't find out you're getting own zoned because you fucked up your tax returns. There is cryptic, unbalanced bullshit which has rightfully thrown off some newcomers. That said, if you can get over that hump and figure things out, this game is rad as hell. The survival horror aspects are strong, and the Von Braun is a complete death trap. From audio logs you find, it's clear the ship wasn't ready for the journey, but in eternal corporate dumbass fashion, they went anyway. Maybe the biggest shortcoming was the ship's AI Xerxes. To prevent another Shodan situation...
Xerxes? I know I recognize that name. I don't recall from where, though. Definitely not from this game. I think it's based on some sort of mythology. I don't know. I'm sure Mandalore will explain it later. Otherwise, I'll search it up in my own time.
And plenty of flaws and backdoors were intentionally built into him. He was so insecure that the crew would hack into him and make him sing Elvis Presley songs, which was harmless until the many came aboard the ship. The turned crew members got Xerxes on their side. He's another unwilling casualty of the many. He announces schedule changes and protocol and other routine stuff. Then he starts praising his new god and saying you won't escape in the same tone.
Security forces have been alerted to your presence, intruder. The glory of the many demands your capture or destruction.
Not only are the mutants against you, but also all the onboard machinery. Your work is cut out for you. Cameras can raise alarms that send out hordes of enemies. You're ambushed in all kinds of unpredictable ways. Right when you think you have a trick figured out, the game might have a new way to twist it. That nowhere is safe feeling is constantly reinforced. Yet it's not horribly punishing in an obvious way. The restoration bays are back and most levels have one to go to. So if you do die, you come back, losing only a bit of money. Which doesn't sound too harsh, but you are losing some resources. There might be new enemies on the way back to where you were. And again, you won't always have this. Your money, which is nanites, is essential. You need it for hacking attempts, to modify weapons, and of course to use the replicator stores. Every bullet shot is a bullet spent. Shock 2 is excellent at making you keep a tally of what you have in the back of your brain. Features like weapon degradation that the team was conflicted on help serve that purpose. You scavenge around for weapons and you might find a better version, but it's more degraded. The use of weapons needs to be spaced out and how they'll fit in your inventory. You could have a Harry Potter duel with a monkey, but you're wasting your brain power. Everything outside of hitting a bad guy with a big stick has a cost. Even then, some enemies explode or have other nasty effects if you kill them in melee. Your trusty wrench and other hit gear never degrades, but some dialogue implies it might have at some point in development. If pure melee sounds like the full way to go, I've tried it. Making a psychic punch man is fun eventually, but there's going to be noticeable levels of suffering on that path. The close quarters build won't be a way to escape from being resource starved. It feels amazing when a last second plan comes together, and System Shock 2 is full of opportunity for those. The skill system...
I can see this whole weapon degradation, weapon durability thing being quite divisive, and I understand why it was during development. Heck, a lot of people didn't even give Breath of the Wild a chance simply because the weapons broke so fast. There's certainly pros and cons to both approaches. I can see why they would implement it though, to have the player be more creative with their weapon choices. And it also gives you a reason to go out there and scout for new weapons too. This is definitely one of those systems where you have to try it out for yourself to then formulate an opinion. But from what I played of Fallout New Vegas and the weapon repairing system there, it's pretty darn forgiving, especially if you pick up any of the perks or the skills in order to repair whatever your favorite weapon is.
Some truly does shine at times, and there can be all kinds of ways to get through the same obstacle. What's a horrible annoyance in one playthrough can become resources in another. Or lunch.
Oh.
When it all comes together, it's pure joy. For being one of the first games with all these systems and the openness, it pulled it off really well. It easily could have been a disaster rather than kind of messy and off balance. Maybe you shouldn't take my word on balance, because every time I replay this game, I always get bamboozled by this jump, and I don't know why. Every time I replay it, I forget, and I usually die there. What is unfortunate is the amount of jankiness the game still has. Even with years of community patches, enemies can glitch and freak out. Hitboxes can be ridiculously huge, but sometimes they're obscured in weird ways. And even with all the hotkeys, the interface can be clunky.
Unit R343 compromised.
Hey, Jesus Christ, I got him!
He's already
dead! This brings us to the story, which stays in line with the rest of the game. Without spoilers, I'll say it's mostly great, but there are some muddled elements. Especially in comparison to 1, the audio logs have some interesting narratives going on. The son of Edward Diego, the moron who caused the Citadel Station event to happen in the first game, is now the captain of the Rickenbacker. He's legitimately trying to do what's right and not be his father. There's a couple making plans to escape, a story of a civil war aboard the ship, the scientists who study the many, a lot of which become part of the many. A lot of side stories are happening, but most of them are intriguing. You can organically put together a lot of what happened before the game spells some things out, some of which I think were way too projected. The main antagonist doesn't try to replace Shodan. The many also want to fundamentally change humanity, but where Shodan was arrogant, the many are more pitying. They genuinely seem sad and repulsed by the idea of not being part of a hive mind. Not only do they tell you this directly, but other characters wonder if they're right.
But you fear us.
We hear your thoughts, and they rage for your brothers you believe dead.
But they are not.
They sing in our symphony of life.
That is an interesting motivation that I honestly appreciate. It's not just, oh, we like eating humans, so we eat you. We pity you because this is how we've lived life. This is how we view things, and we want you to be a part of this awesome thing that we have. But in this sci-fi setting, I can see this being a very realistic motivation for an alien species. And I do love the implementation of all these different side stories that are going on. I think they're important for making the world feel alive and constantly moving, even when you're not there to do anything about it.
We offer another chance to join us.
Told us of the planet of her birth.
We know how you have harmed this place with your pollution,
your violence,
and your discord. But when we arrive there,
we will cleanse the surface of that place
and merge it with the harmony of the many.
In some ways, the many is not unlike the UNN. There's a joy in working towards a collective goal, in being able to put aside the things that draw us apart and make us separate. Why do we fear the loss of our individuality so much? Man can dream, but the many can accomplish.
It's a great new direction to take. They do get angry at all you destroy of theirs, but they still believe that they're in the right. They're trying to help you and all of mankind, but you just don't get it. How this all ends is very underwhelming, but
he just sitting in the core. Actually, no, it's the Joker beam. You wouldn't get it. I understand the argument from the human side of things, who maybe sympathizes with the many and wants to join them. But like, yeah, there is discrimination. You just look at our modern day society. But because of that, we also have freedom of choice. I think that's pretty darn important. Ultimately, everything has its drawbacks. Nothing is perfect.
But if you don't want spoilers, go to here.
I'm here for all the spoilers, sir.
Okay, so Dr. Polito. While she works with you to stop the many, she's very bossy. Technical-minded, ends justify the means, she gives no shits about the crew. It's odd because you find some of her audio logs around and she sounds much nicer.
But I've been working on that artifact Bayless brought back from Tau City 5. I've done a level 3 analysis on it. I think it's some kind of artificial intelligence.
Oh.
I've managed to pull an audio tag file out of its memory. I'll let you be the judge.
Oh boy, meeting her is gonna explain a lot.
Hi. That's not good.
The Polito form is dead, insect. Are you afraid?
Hi,
What is it you
Shodan.
fear?
The end of your trivial existence. When the history of my glory is written,
Your species shall only be a footnote to my magnificence.
Hello.
I am Shodan.
What up?
My analysis of historical data suggests a 97.34% probability that you are aware of my birth on your planet.
This is one hell of a spectacular reveal. The issue is that the game foreshadows this way too hard. Xerxes spells it out 5 minutes in.
Intruder, the many demands to know your intentions. Are you allied with her? Do you not know of her intentions, of her history? She once tried to destroy your species, and now you do her bidding.
Oh, Polito. Polito's fucking Shodan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Xerxes. Hell, we could go back.
Man, foreshadowing is pretty hard to do. There are plenty of examples where it's done way too heavy-handedly, and so it's like, oh, it kind of takes away from the whole twist and surprise. And other times where if it's not done well enough, then something just comes out of nowhere and the twist is very unsatisfying. It's unfortunate that it's a little too heavy-handed, and you could make the argument that being more vague with your foreshadowing is better than being too blatant. I'm not a professional writer, so I'm not sure which one would be better.
Back to the intro, or the box. So the first thing I would do here is change the marketing material.
Okay, never mind. This is a little way too heavy. Let's just throw everything I talked about when it came to foreshadowing out the window and be like, let's not advertise the twist of our story by putting it on the very front of the page or inside of your trailer, or generally speaking in any sort of promotional material for your series. Never put in the twist, and don't reveal too much, but reveal just enough to get people to want to play your game. Honestly, the name System Shock itself is damn good enough to sell your game. I think so, at least. Why couldn't we have Xerxes' face on here instead of Shodan's? Also, I now remember where I heard Xerxes from. Isn't that the name of the Persian king? Was he Persian? I don't know, the guy from 300, I'm pretty sure it was called Xerxes, the God King, or, well, he claimed himself to be a God King anyways.
I contacted Dakota Lee about this because he's done some pretty good game key art. I'm only guessing he's not the dog, but here's what we got brainstormed up. On the official cover, our twist character is front and center. System Shock 1 just had a regular cyborg enemy on it. So in that vein, why not one of the many's hybrids? This is more accurate to who you're facing 99% of the game. If you did want to go all out and still have scary rogue AI on the cover, why not Xerxes? Dakota actually may have outdone himself here. Of course, this is for fun, and from a marketing standpoint, putting Shodan on the cover does make sense. But I still would have loved an awesome cover that let them get away with the twist. What's happening is foreshadowed subtly, and I think you could rip out those overt lines without hurting anything. The many outright ask why you're serving the cybernetic metal mother. I mean, Jesus Christ, just come out and say it.
The elderly bitch is clearly a robot.
Clearly a robot.
How could it not be Shodan?
Fucking idiot.
I'm not sure why it had to be so heavy-handed. You can remove almost all the foreshadowing and it would still be effective. The next reveal is that the many are not aliens. Instead, they're mutant descendants of a garden grove on Citadel Station. In particular, the one the hacker jettisoned, and Shodan had a server node or something there as well, so she also survived. It crashed in Tau Ceti 5 30 years later, the lifeforms evolved rapidly, and the Von Braun picked up their signal a decade or so later. I've heard some people wonder how the Grove got from Saturn to Tau Ceti in only 30 years. Scientifically, I'd guess it went through a who gives a shit wormhole, but you can do further research if that kind of stuff really bothers you. Shodan teams up with the player against the many, and this is where things get iffy for me. It's especially weird because in game circles now, people reference System Shock 2 Shodan, but they treat her like she's System Shock 1 Shodan. Before, she's almost everything fighting you. She's both the Dungeon Master and the dungeon itself. You're at her mercy, and she knows it and she owns it. She's just as arrogant and egotistical in 2. Her audio mixing and effects are as creepy as ever, and Terry just blows it away with the performance.
You move like an insect. You think like an insect. You are an insect.
I can now transfer my magnificence to the Rickenbacker.
However, when it comes to her role, she's basically reduced to a glorified quest giver. You do her tasks and she says, "You're my slave and I'm gonna step on you," but that never happens, and I didn't really feel a threat of that happening. There is one brief moment where you can disobey her and she takes her cyber modules away instead of awarding them. This is a cool moment, and I would have loved if there was more stuff like that. She gets more power and can start affecting the ship systems or your own cybernetics and perception. Instead, she does nothing. You challenge the many by crawling inside of its huge...
That's a little unfortunate. I do see the shift in direction though, and the idea here from like enemies to allies. Would this have worked better if we had the same sort of relationship well, between our character and Shodan that our character in Marathon did with Durandal? Maybe something more akin to that would have worked a bit better here.
Biomass, which is now engulfing the ship. This huge cavernous flesh labyrinth is unlike anything you've played so far. You're completely out of your element, which you didn't have much of to begin with, and it's an overall great send-off. Also, a fun fact about a lot of the original textures here. One of the producers had to go in for some kind of procedure and kept the film. The body of the many is based off someone's actual colon. Speaking of shitty things, the Dark Engine was never good with moving platforms.
Speaking of shitty things. Oh man, the script writing cracks me up.
Some people might say it's teeth grinding and they made that literal. It's really just this one section you see, but it's so awful that it's ingrained in a lot of memories. This single jump may have tainted a lot of perception on the body of the many. That's impressive in its own right, and it's the kind of thing you need to play to really understand. When you're deeper than ever, you need to take down the many's brain. As classic as their games are, Looking Glass never quite got boss fights right.
Oh, okay.
Done and done. Let's see that again in Wizard Vision. Underwhelming, but I'll take that over tedium any day. As you leave the body, the many takes its final moments to warn you about Shodan. It laments its dying, but still relates to you more over a machine. After everything, it would still rather see you and humanity live over its metal mother. Shodan then immediately betrays you, as expected. And while games like this require suspension of disbelief, Shodan's plan is bonkers.
If Shodan is left to continue, her reality will completely assimilate ours. Space will become cyberspace, and Shodan's whims will become reality.
Oh no, making the entire space into cyberspace is a nightmare. Imagine trying to navigate all of that again. How would she even achieve that?
Right. She's somehow using the ship's FTL engine to merge cyberspace and real space to become God. So if this was more substantial or longer, I would be on board. Navigating a Shodan-controlled nightmare world would be a fun final challenge. A corrupted, balls-to-the-walls version of the Von Braun and the Rickenbacker. Shodan could be expanded out to be a real final villain and a good showdown. Instead, you walk through a mostly empty, condensed version of System Shock 1's medical wing. You can easily get to her within about 3 minutes of her betrayal. To make matters worse, somehow her boss fight is even more underwhelming than the Many Brain. It all feels very tacked on. It was either going to be a whole new act that got shortened down, or they thought killing the Many wasn't enough, so you had to go kill Shodan too.
Damn, that's unfortunate. We had so many good things up until the end here. If they do actually do a System Shock 2 remake, I hope they rework this whole final bit, because yeah, I agree with the sentiment that it is quite underwhelming.
Funnily enough, the community patch put a good amount of attention here, and vanilla looks way, way worse. That all said, you get her.
How could you have done this?
Maybe you're not as much of a god as you think you are.
And now
you think to destroy. You think to destroy me.
Yes.
How dare you, insect?
How dare you interrupt my ascendance? You are nothing.
A wretched bag of flesh.
What are you
compared to my magnificence?
But it is
not too late. Can you not see the value in our friendship? Imagine the powers
I can give
to you, human. The cybernetic implants I gave you were simply toys.
If I desired, I could improve you, transform you into something more efficient. Join me, human.
Classic villain trying to say whatever they need to say in order to get out of dying. How about no? There's no way in hell is anybody stupid enough to trust Shodan, right? Right?
And we can rule.
And we can rule together.
Nah.
What? Wait, is that actually canon? Or was that a Mandalore edit? Nah.
I know
Get
people
out of
who
here,
hate
Shodan.
this, but this is a high note for me. What better way to tell off a wannabe god? Use a tone like she asked if you want some of her fries.
Oh my god, that was actually... How was it edited? That's actually how it ends. Dude, that's so beautiful. I love that. Greatest ending to any game ever. Heck yeah.
Also, she's alive because she possessed someone or something, so
what?
This was pointless.
Oh.
Anyway, this game is a classic and highly influential. It's also very flawed, but it still holds up. It has this aesthetic and tone and blend of elements that you can't find anywhere else. It paved the way for huge games, little games, and probably more games to come. It is so worth checking out. For the next week or so, it'll be $2 in the pinned link, which is absurdly more than worth it. All the modding stuff will be there too. The story's not over just yet. Like the first game, Night Dive is making an enhanced version of System Shock 2. I have no idea how hard it'll go on polishing or huge balance changes or making multiplayer playable, but I am excited to see what they do with it. Not to mention System Shock 3 is coming, just in time for a Dead Space reboot.
Wait, what? System Shock 3? That's a thing? Right. I searched it up really quickly. There is no release date. The game is in an unknown state. It hasn't been canceled, but nobody knows what's happening with it. Not sure what's going to happen there. Maybe they're waiting to see how popular the remakes are before they decide to actually push the development of the game. But with the modern gaming industry and modern development cycles as they are, I'm kind of doubtful. It might fall into the same category as my hopes and dreams for the Knights of the Old Republic remake and just be stuck there forever. If you guys know any more details, please let me know. I do want to know more about it, but yeah, it doesn't look too good.
I don't know what's happening anymore. I'll see you next time. What do I think of the Games Workshop IP situation? It was actually unusual for them not to be huge dicks about it for this long at once. There is some irony there since their settings started as kit bashes of other properties. In any case, I doubt I'll have more Warhammer videos this year. Unless Total Warhammer 3 comes out, which in that case, oh boy. Would I play P4 for a charity milestone? I have no idea how the hell that would happen, but yeah, sure. Maybe like the Osteoporosis Foundation due to the lack of jumping? It could be fun if it's for a good cause. D&D 3.5 or 5e? Oh god, 3.5 is such a rabbit hole when it comes to magic, and 5 definitely is easier to get people into. But I do think they cut down some skills too hard. Most campaigns I play are homebrew anyways, but most people nowadays seem to spin off 5e rather than 3.5. Favorite?
Gotcha. I've heard a lot of debates around 3.5 and 5e, and even when we're playing our D&D campaign, there will be random people jumping into chat and asking which system we're playing off of. I don't know anything about 3.5 though, so I guess it's just like the two most popular ones currently.
And least favorite Halo games. For Campaign 2, for Multiplayer 3, I stopped playing 4 early on and have not tried 5. I am curious about Infinite. If they keep the Banished as the big bad, that'll be the funniest thing on the planet. Okay, till next time.
I now see why System Shock 2 is so highly regarded. There's these incredible systems that we have in modern day games that were sort of introduced here. I'm not sure if this was the first instance of that, but the fact that they did it during these early stages and was able to make a game that actually functioned and wasn't just a complete mess is downright impressive. The people that used to work at Looking Glass Studio were just built different. From a narrative perspective, there are certain story bits here and there that definitely could have been done better, but not everything can be perfect. I'm sure there was a ton of effort put elsewhere, and ultimately I could still accept the image as a whole, especially with how influential this game has been for every other game since. But yeah, dudes, let me know how System Shock 3 is going, and what other series I should check out next. As of recording this, I'm thinking the next Mandalore reactions I'll check out will probably be the Penumbra series. Is that how you say that? Penumbra, Amnesia, some of the horror games. I really enjoy horror, but I also don't know anything about the series, and I feel like I should, because I've only heard really good things about them, and they're sort of classic horror games. So I should at least be somewhat familiar with how they work. But yeah, that's gonna be it from me, dudes. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.